I never thought my perfect life would crumble so spectacularly. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Upper East Side penthouse, I watched the city lights twinkle like stars beneath me. Another lonely Friday night. Michael was working late again. I checked my phone, no messages, no calls. Just silence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Sarah Thompson, one of Manhattan's top real estate agents, living in a $12 million apartment that I'd sold to countless wealthy clients. And yet I felt emptier than any of the vacant properties I showed. 5 years ago, when Michael and I got married, everyone said we were the perfect couple. The ambitious investment banker and the successful realtor. We were supposed to have it all. Maybe we did, once. I remember how we used to spend Sunday mornings in bed, planning our future between kisses and coffee. Now I couldn't remember the last time we'd had breakfast together. Or a real conversation that wasn't about bills or social obligations. The sound of my heels echoed through our marble-floored apartment as I walked to the bar and poured myself a glass of wine. Chardonnay, the expensive kind Michael always bought but never drank. My phone buzzed. A message from Michael, major deal closing. Don't wait up. I didn't bother responding. What was the point? He wouldn't read it until morning anyway. The city below continued its endless dance of lights and shadows, while I sat alone in our designer living room, surrounded by modern art pieces that cost more than most people's annual salary. None of it meant anything anymore. I opened my laptop, seeking any kind of distraction. Social media only made it worse. Everyone's lives seemed so perfect, so connected. That's when the ad appeared. Midnight Secrets, where reality meets fantasy. I should have closed the browser. Should have gone to bed. Should have called one of my friends. Instead, I clicked. The site was sleek, sophisticated. Not your typical dating platform. It promised discretion, connection, understanding. Everything I was starving for. Before I could talk myself out of it, I created a profile. Nothing too revealing, just enough to be intriguing. I told myself I was just looking. Just curious about what was out there. The responses came almost immediately. Most were exactly what you'd expect. Desperate, crude, obvious. But one stood out. Dark Romeo, looks like we're both awake in the city that never sleeps. His profile was minimal but intelligent. No photos, just like mine. But something in his words caught my attention. We started chatting. Simple things at first. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled. He was witty, articulate. He asked questions about me, real questions. Not just the superficial small talk I'd grown used to. Hours slipped by unnoticed. When I finally looked at the clock, it was past midnight. Same time tomorrow? He asked. I hesitated for a mo. Meant. Then typed yes before I could change my mind. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, our late-night conversations became my escape. He understood the loneliness of success. The emptiness of having everything and nothing at the same time. We never shared personal details. Never exchanged photos or real names. It made everything feel safer, somehow. Less real. Michael noticed the change in me. But not in the way I'd hoped. You seem distracted lately, he said one morning. Barely looking up from his phone. Am I? I replied, studying his face for any sign of real concern. There was none. He was already absorbed in his emails. the distance between us grew wider with each passing day. While Michael buried himself in spreadsheets and client meetings, I found myself living for those midnight conversations. Dark Romeo became my confidant, the one person who seemed to see the real me. We shared our fears, our dreams, the parts of ourselves we kept hidden from the world. One night, after a particularly brutal charity gala, where Michael had spent the entire evening networking, leaving me to make small talk with trophy wives, Dark Romeo asked me a question that changed everything. What if we met in person? My heart stopped. Meeting would make it real. Cross a line I'd been pretending didn't exist. I can't, I typed. Can't. Or won't. His words hung on the screen, challenging everything I thought I knew about myself. I'm married, I finally admitted. I know, he replied. You've mentioned him before. The workaholic husband who takes you for granted. The man who hasn't really seen you in years. His words hit too close to home. That's not fair, I protested. But wasn't it? When was the last time Michael had asked about my day? Really asked, not just out of obligation? Life's not fair, Dark Romeo wrote. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it. Sometimes we need to take what we deserve. I closed the laptop. But his words stayed with me. The next day, Michael announced he had to fly to London. Another important deal. Another week alone. He kissed my cheek absently as he left. Already on the phone with his team. I watched him go. Feeling nothing but a dull ache where love used to be. That night, when Dark Romeo asked again about meeting, I didn't say no. We agreed on a place, the Peninsula Hotel. Neutral territory, he called it. Somewhere we could talk face to face. See if the connection was real. Just talking, I told myself. Nothing more. I spent hours choosing what to wear. Settling on a black dress that was elegant but not too obvious. My hands trembled as I applied my makeup, trying to ignore the voice in my head screaming that this was wrong. The peninsula's lobby was crowded with tourists and business people, none of them paying attention to the woman in the black dress, who was about to blow up her life. He'd told me to go to the rooftop bar. Sigh. He'd be wearing a blue tie. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor bringing me closer to a point of no return. When the doors opened, I stepped into another world. The Manhattan skyline spread out before me, a glittering canvas of possibilities. The bar was dimly lit, intimate, perfect for secrets. I scanned the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. And then I saw him. He was sitting at a corner table, watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Tall, dark-haired, dangerous in an elegant way. Nothing like Michael. The blue tie caught the light as he stood, extending his hand with a smile that promised everything. Sarah, he said, my name sounding like silk on his tongue. I'm James. His real name. The first truth we'd shared. I should have turned and run. Should have gone home and deleted the app. Should have fought for my marriage. Instead, I took his hand. And with that simple gesture, I stepped off the edge of my perfectly constructed life, into a free fall that would destroy everything. The wine he ordered was expensive. The conversation effortless. In person, the connection was even stronger. He listened like I was the only person in the world, his eyes never leaving mine. 2 hours passed like minutes. "Would you like to see the view from my room?" he asked. We both knew it wasn't really about the view. I thought about Michael. Probably in some London boardroom. Not thinking about me at all. "Yes," I heard myself say. The elevator ride to his floor was silent. Charged with everything unsaid. His room was a suite, of course. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park. But I wasn't looking at the view. His kiss was everything I'd been missing. Passionate, present, real. I surrendered to it completely. Letting years of loneliness and frustration melt away. His hands knew exactly where to touch. His lips exactly what to say. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Desired. Seen. Hours later, lying in his arms. Watching the city lights dance across the ceiling. I didn't feel guilty. Not yet. That would come later. In that moment, I felt only peace. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that nothing this perfect could come without a price. I had no idea how right that voice would be, or how high that price would be. But in that hotel room, high above the city, I was simply a woman who had found what she'd been missing. The guilt, the consequences, the destruction. All of that was still waiting in the wings. For now, there was only this. His breath on my skin. The warmth of his body against mine. And the illusion that I could have this moment. Without paying for it with everything I had. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. But that's the thing about perfect moments. They blind you to the storm that's coming. And this storm? It would tear my world apart. I woke up alone in my own bed. The next morning, the events at the peninsula feeling like a dream. But the slight bruise on my collarbone told a different story. Michael was still in London. His side of the bed cold and untouched. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt strangely alive. My phone buzzed a message from James. "Last night was perfect. When can I see you again?" The responsible thing would have been to end it there. But I was tired of being responsible. Tired of being the perfect wife. Waiting at home for a husband who had forgotten how to love me. We met again 3 days later. Different hotel, same intoxicating connection. Then again the following week. Each time telling myself it would be the last. Each time knowing I was lying. James became my addiction. The way he looked at me. The way he touched me. The way he made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But something changed after our 4th meeting. Subtle at first. A shift in the air around me. Like being watched. I started noticing black cars following my real estate showings. Catching glimpses of familiar faces in crowds. My paranoia grew with each passing day. Then Michael came home from London. Something was different about him. He was more attentive, almost too attentive. Asking about my days in detail. Wanting to know where I'd been, who I'd seen. "You seem different," he said one evening. Studying me over his wine glass. His eyes were cold, calculating. Nothing like the distracted husband I'd known. "Do I?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Happier, maybe," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Must be all those successful property sales. The way he said it made my skin crawl. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. I checked my phone, wanting to message James. But stopped myself. For the first time, I felt afraid. Not of being caught, but of something deeper, more sinister. The next morning, Michael suggested we host a dinner party. To celebrate your recent success, he said. His smile was predatory. I couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. The guest list made me nervous. All of Michael's colleagues from the investment bank. People I barely knew. The evening started normally enough. Expensive wine flowed freely. Conversation stayed superficial. Until Michael stood up to make a toast. To my beautiful wife, he raised his glass. Who always keeps me guessing. The way his colleagues smirked made my blood run cold. After dinner, Michael insisted on showing everyone his latest technology acquisition. A state-of-the-art home theater system. My heart stopped when the screen lit up. The footage was crystal clear. Me entering the peninsula. Me in the elevator with James. Me in moments that were supposed to be private. The room spun. Faces around me blurred. Some looked away in embarrassment. Others watched with cruel fascination. Michael's hand gripped my shoulder. His fingers digging in painfully. Isn't technology amazing? He said cheerfully. How it captures everything. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I emerged, everyone was gone. Michael sat waiting in the living room. Calm as a snake about to strike. Did you really think I wouldn't know? His voice was ice. That I wouldn't find out about your little adventure? He pulled out his phone. Showing me more footage. Every meeting with James. Every kiss. Every touch. I'm a data analyst, Sarah. Tracking people is what I do. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The app you met him on? I own the company that developed it. The room tilted dangerously. James works for me. Has from the beginning. Each word was a dagger. This was all a test, Sarah. One you failed spectacularly. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Why? I managed to whisper. Because I needed to know if you were worth keeping. He stood, straightening his perfect suit. Now I know you're not. But don't worry. You're still useful. He walked to the bar, poured himself a drink. You're going to keep seeing him. Following my script. And my friends? They're going to keep watching. And if I refuse? My voice shook. He smiled, showing me another video. This one would destroy my career. My reputation. Everything I'd worked for. You won't refuse. Because now? You belong to me. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about love or betrayal. This was about power. Control. I'd walked right into his trap. Thinking I was escaping a loveless marriage. Only to find myself in something far worse. A cage of my own making. The next few weeks became a blur of humiliation. Meetings with James, now knowing he was Michael's puppet. Each encounter recorded, documented. My shame turned into entertainment. For Michael's twisted circle of friends. I lost weight. Couldn't sleep. My real estate clients started to notice. But I couldn't tell them the truth. Couldn't tell anyone. Michael watched me spiral with clinical detachment. Like a scientist observing a lab rat. Sometimes he'd make me watch the videos with him. Commenting on my performance like a critic at a play. James kept playing his part perfectly. Though sometimes I caught a flicker of guilt in his eyes. It didn't matter. We were both trapped in Michael's game now. One night, after a particularly cruel viewing session, Michael revealed his true motivation. You know what the best part is? He swirled his whiskey, watching the ice dance. Everyone thinks I'm the victim. The poor, deceived husband. It's perfect for my image. Sympathy can be very profitable in my business. I stared at him, finally understanding. This wasn't just about punishing me. It was about building his empire. My destruction was just a bonus. A means to an end. That night, lying awake in our bed, listening to Michael's steady breathing beside me, I realized something important. He'd taken everything from me. My dignity, my freedom, my self-respect. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd shown me who he really was. And in doing so, he'd given me a weapon. I just had to figure out how to use it. The question was, could I play his game better than he could? I had nothing left to lose. And everything to gain. The real game was just beginning. I started my counterattack slowly, carefully. Like a chess player setting up pieces. Each move had to be perfect. First, I needed proof of Michael's manipulation. The app wasn't just a dating platform. It was a trap for wealthy, vulnerable women. I wasn't his first victim. Just his most ambitious project. During our performances for his friends, I started paying attention to their conversations. Names dropped carelessly. Companies mentioned in passing. Each one a potential piece of the puzzle. I created a burner email account at the public library. Away from Michael's surveillance. Started reaching out to other women. The responses were heartbreaking. Dozens of stories similar to mine. All involving Michael's circle. All ending in blackmail. James proved to be my unexpected ally. I can't do this anymore, he whispered during one of our staged meetings. His guilt was eating him alive. I saw my chance. Then help me bring him down. The risk was enormous. If Michael discovered our conspiracy, we'd both pay dearly. But James agreed. He started copying files, recording conversations, building our case piece by piece. Meanwhile, I played my role perfectly. The broken wife, the obedient puppet. I let Michael think he'd won completely. Even suggested more elaborate scenarios for his videos. Each time dying inside. But gathering more evidence. The breakthrough came 3 months into our plan. One of Michael's drunk colleagues let slip about their offshore accounts. The blackmail money wasn't just for fun. It was funding something bigger. Something illegal. James confirmed it through his access to the company's servers. Michael's investment bank was running a massive Ponzi scheme. The blackmail videos were insurance. Keeping wealthy clients quiet when they started asking questions. I took everything to a lawyer. Not in New York, too risky. A firm in Boston, specialized in financial crimes. They were very interested in what I had to say. The FBI got involved. Weeks of secret meetings. Careful documentation. Building an airtight case. All while maintaining my performance for Michael. It was the hardest acting job of my life. Then came the night of Michael's big client gala. Everyone who was anyone in Manhattan finance was there. Including several federal agents posing as investors. Michael was in his element. Charming the crowd. His hand possessively on my waist. He had no idea what was coming. The raid happened just after his speech. The look on his face when the agents walked in. I'll never forget it. Pure shock transforming into rage. As he realized who had betrayed him. You, he snarled, lunging for me. But the agents were faster. As they led him away in handcuffs. He screamed that he would destroy me. But he couldn't. Not anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just the financial crimes. But the systematic blackmail. The manipulation. All of it. His entire empire crumbled in days. The scandal rocked Wall Street. Investment bankers' dark web of deceit, the headlines screamed. Other victims came forward. James testified against him, providing crucial insider information. I lost everything in the aftermath. The apartment, the social status. Most of my clients. But I gained something more valuable. My freedom. The divorce was quick. Michael's lawyers were too busy with his criminal defense to fight over assets. I moved to a small apartment in Brooklyn. Started rebuilding my life from scratch. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering those dark months of captivity. But then I remind myself, I survived. I fought back. I won. Last week, I heard Michael was sentenced. 20 years for fraud, extortion, and racketeering. No chance of early release. James got immunity for his cooperation. He left New York, trying to find redemption somewhere else. I hope he finds it. As for me, I'm learning to trust again. Learning to live without fear. My real estate business is slowly recovering. Though now I specialize in helping women find safe places to start over. Sometimes clients ask about my story. Having read about it in the papers, I tell them the truth. That sometimes the perfect life is the perfect lie. That strength comes from surviving the fall. And that the most dangerous predators often wear the most respectable masks. Yesterday, I walked past the peninsula. Looked up at those gleaming windows. Remembering the night that changed everything. I don't regret what happened. Not anymore. It taught me who I really am. What I'm capable of. And that sometimes the greatest victory comes from losing everything and finding yourself in the wreckage. I'm not the same Sarah Thompson who walked into that hotel. She died somewhere along the way. But the woman who emerged from the ashes? She's stronger, wiser, free. And that's worth everything I lost. The city lights still twinkle below my new apartment. Not as high up as before, but somehow more beautiful. Because now I know the truth. Real power isn't in controlling others. It's in controlling your own story. And my story? It's just beginning. End.